It's October 8th, 2020. I'm NBC 15 Chief Meteorologist Alan Sealls talking about Hurricane Delta, less than 24 hours away from making landfall on the southwest coast of Louisiana. As of late afternoon on this Thursday, maximum sustained wind 115 miles an hour. It's a little stronger than it was earlier today, but nowhere near as strong as it was a couple of days ago when it was a powerful Category 4. The motion is still steady to the northwest at 12 miles an hour, and it is a Category 3 storm, which means something, but it also doesn't mean as much when you consider that it only takes 1 mile per hour difference to drop from a Category 3 to a Category 2. You should expect the wind speed to fluctuate a little bit, so don't be surprised to hear that it's a 2 or a 3. That's not necessarily a trend. It is more likely a fluctuation. But when you talk about wind, this is what's significant. A typical day, if you're outside, a 10 mile per hour wind, consider that like a baseline wind. When the wind speed doubles, the force of that wind actually quadruples. So when you go from a 10 to a 20 to a 40 mile per hour wind, the force of a 40 mile per hour wind is 16 times greater than a 10 mile per hour wind. That's also known as wind load, and that makes a big deal when you design buildings. Go down to hurricane force winds, 64 times greater than a 10 mile per hour wind. And if you take an extreme hurricane like Hurricane Dorian in the Bahamas that had winds of 160 miles per hour, you can see how extreme the force of the wind is. So little changes in wind by itself doesn't make a big deal, but as that wind doubles, there's a big difference in the force, in the impact. In the red area, southwestern Louisiana, that's where hurricane force winds are likely. It's a hurricane warning, meaning steady winds of 75 miles an hour or greater, very likely there. Surrounding that in orange, that's a tropical storm warning where the winds would be steady between about 40 and 75 miles per hour. Now, they will always gust higher than that. And notice I focus on the NBC 15 area, not under a hurricane warning, not under a tropical storm warning. But we have seen some outer rain bands from Hurricane Delta already impacting our area. Now this system, it's moving steadily. The steering winds are fairly strong, and all the models generally point toward the same area. Unlike Hurricane Sally that slowed and stalled, this one is almost certain to make landfall in southwestern Louisiana with little deviation. The forecast cone, you'll notice it's narrower than it was days ago simply because it's closer to landfall. In other words, the uncertainty has shifted farther to the northeast, away from where it is right now. This forecast cone also is only a 3-day forecast cone. The reason why, after 3 days, the storm will have dissipated. Look at the landfall wind projection, somewhere between 120 miles an hour or likely less. The general trend is for the winds to be their strongest tomorrow morning and then gradually go down as this gets closer to land. But again, they still are going to fluctuate. By the time it goes inland, going into early Saturday, way before sunrise, it'll still be a hurricane, becoming a tropical storm after daylight, moving through northern Louisiana into northern Mississippi as a tropical storm fading to a tropical depression. From the NBC 15 area, that's a healthy distance, but it doesn't mean there are zero impact. Go back though, 6 weeks ago, this is not Delta, this is Hurricane Laura, a Category 4 that made landfall in southwestern Louisiana over the community of Cameron, moving through Lake Charles, a devastating storm. And when you look at the structure of the storm, you see this one big band of rain on the east side stretching into the Gulf of Mexico. That's a feeder band. Watch it again, going back 6 weeks ago, and it looks like Delta will be in a very similar position. And watch right there and compare that to this forecast projection for tomorrow, Friday afternoon, going into Friday evening. It is very possible that this next system, Delta, could be exactly where Laura was. And even if it's not exactly, it's too close. That's the problem. This part of southwestern Louisiana was devastated by a Category 4 hurricane. Things are nowhere near back together, and now you'll have a hurricane that's not as strong over the same area, but it could have even greater impact because the infrastructure is already crippled. So that's the forecast starting 8 o'clock Friday evening for Hurricane Delta in southwestern Louisiana. The bigger picture shows it moving inland, similarly to the north, then to the northeast, Arkansas, Mississippi. And for those of us in the NBC 15 area, our focus, that band of rain right there, very similar. And remember, this is a computer projection, so there may be a couple bands, there may be several, and this one band may not actually turn out to be there. But we have to watch for it, because as it gets closer to us, moving through coastal Mississippi into Alabama, going into Saturday afternoon, that is what brings the higher potential for isolated tornadoes in that feeder band. It's also what brings the higher threat for heavy rainfall, because thunderstorms will move over and over the same spot if it's a slow progressing band as the thunderstorms move to the north. So right now for the NBC 15 area, small storm surge, winds not extreme, but isolated tornado threat is a possibility. We'll watch carefully. We'll have a better idea tomorrow, but honestly, we may not know until Saturday what that threat could be. So 6 a.m., this is Saturday morning, the NBC 15 area. We will have an east to southeast wind averaging about 15 miles an hour, stronger at the coast, maybe 20 miles an hour. And where you see the green, that is winds that are 20 to 30 miles an hour. Blue is less than that. We move through Saturday morning. The winds start to pick up a little bit by noontime, averaging about 20 miles an hour. Notice some spots a little higher, like Leakesville at 26. Same thing in Biloxi. So these are rough averages. They are not exact and precise. From noon, with that southeast wind going to a little more of a southerly wind by 6 o'clock in the evening, along the coast, steady winds 20, 25 miles an hour. They will gust higher than that. So we're looking for that wind to pick up as the threat of an isolated tornado comes in. And then after we go through Saturday evening, winds begin to diminish. Keep in mind, we're still basically 24 hours away from landfall. So the numbers I showed you about a projected landfall wind speed and location, there is still latitude as to how accurate that number can be. So nothing is certain at this point with regard to those specific details. We do know storm surge is coming along with this storm, as it does with all hurricanes. It's the wind that pushes water uphill onshore, and as it pushes the water levels up, you also have to account for the natural tide cycle. So for those of us in the NBC 15 area, our high tide, 4 o'clock in the morning, low tide about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So that kind of works in our favor, because Saturday afternoon is when we'll have our highest wind, but it's when the natural tide goes down. So that will limit the total amount of storm surge that we'll see, limiting it to about 1 to 3 feet. But you'll likely see water splashing over the causeway in Mobile Bay, as it typically does, with a strong southeast to south wind. The storm surge warnings, those cover most of coastal Mississippi, but certainly the Louisiana coast, where highest water levels could be 6 to 11 feet. That's storm surge, water being pushed by wind. Water has tremendous power. If you take a box, 12 inches on each side, a cubic foot, and fill it with water, that box weighs 64 pounds, a cubic foot of water. And if you make that a cubic yard, multiply it by 3 by 3 by 3, it weighs 1,700 pounds, a cubic yard. And just imagine putting a cubic yard of water in your SUV, which could hold multiple cubic yards. It will far exceed the weight of your vehicle, and that's why moving water has so much power. Rain forecast for the NBC 15 area, we're looking for several inches of rain, especially as that rain band is likely to come in here on Saturday. But notice that the heaviest rain, Lake Charles northward into southeastern Arkansas, 5 to 8 inches of rain. It could be more than that. That's about average, though, for your average moving hurricane. So here in the NBC 15 area, we've had some rain, some thunderstorms, some downpours earlier on our Thursday. They all continue to move northward. Still a lot of lightning in parts of our area. And through the rest of our evening, overnight, that rain goes north, fades away. We should get a nice lull in terms of heavy rain, but there still will be some isolated showers, and that's going to be the trend as we move through Friday. Mid-70s to start our day. Afternoon temperatures get into the lower 80s. And then in the afternoon, we may see another band of rain come through with some downpours. Not that it's going to last all day. So where we stand right now for the NBC 15 area, our overall threats from Hurricane Delta are low. The one that we'll watch most closely is the threat of a tornado, which we won't really have a clear picture until moving through Friday into Saturday. And then, of course, moderate storm surge. We won't see extreme wind. Flooding, coastal flooding is a possibility. Low-lying areas like Dauphin Island, Bila Battery, Coden, spots that typically flood with a steady south wind, that's what you'll have to watch out for. So Saturday will be our biggest impact day, whereas Friday will be the biggest impact day for coastal Louisiana. Once we get past Saturday, then things are looking pretty good, pretty calm, but we still have a way to go to get through the hurricane season. So we will keep watching the Gulf, the Caribbean, the Atlantic. Don't let your guard down, no matter what. I'm NBC 15 Chief Meteorologist Alan Sealls.